Aloha. This morning, I want to introduce a new form and format of our podcasts and YouTubes. And we're going to call this Coach's Corner. And our first coach, who's been doing coaching work for a long time, is Floyd Jerkins. He's been with us before, but we want to go down a different path this morning. So good morning, Mr. Jerkins. How are you today?
Oh, and good morning to you. Glad to be here.
Yes, it's always fun when you and I talk. You know, one of the major items that you and I both agree with is management's primary responsibility and leadership is to implement things. And we're trying to create a platform, you and I and others, where we provide a resource where people can come looking for answers, looking for different perspectives. So we provide people thought issues, perspectives, ideas. How do we get them from, gee, that's a great idea, to implementation? And that kind of coaching hasn't typically been around the industry. And yet that's something that I think is really badly needed. And I suspect you do too.
Well, we were just talking about some university professors and what they teach. And, you know, to me, there's the difference between the philosophy and then the implementation that gets you what I call the trench attitude. And, you know, I do agree. I think there's, you know, just through all the material that your group is putting together, Ron, there is a tremendous amount of practical application that comes out of that. And I think in this next journey that you were talking about, I think that's going to bring some of the more elevated thoughts that some organizations, you know, coming behind them and pushing them. And I think that has a lot to do with the leadership view, the management view, you know, what they see themselves, you know, and who are they in the organization. You know, we always, you know, I used to get labeled, oh, you're just a consultant with those fancy terms. You know, I said, well, but I've also been in the trench. You know, I drove my own companies before, and you know, for me, it was just a stepping stone process of getting out and recognizing the vast amount of businesses, and they all have some degree of uniqueness to it. You know, when I first started the consulting company, you know, I come out of, you know, dealer development, I own stores, so it was like, okay, now what? Nobody knows me. I mean, and you know, they know me in that thin degree of the market that I just came out of, but in the broad range of things, well, who the hell is this guy? So, you know, I created a couple products, you know, something to sell. One was a dealership assessment where I would go in for 2 or 3 days based upon the size of complex, and I would do an analysis. I'd collect all their financial information, all their data ahead of time, and, you know, spend some time going through it. And probably the first 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I probably looked at least 30, 35 businesses a year because I did all the assessments. And it was always amazing to me how, you know, I could look at 2 different complexes, one doing 18 million, another one doing 21. And you'd think they're vastly different. But when you get inside and see, there's so many commonalities upon the operational flows, some of the systems that were being used or the systems that weren't being used, but they always had some uniqueness. And generally it was a driving force in the organization at that level or that size. You know, when you go to 5 stores, 10 stores, 20 stores, when you go from 30 to 50 to 100 to 200 employees, you know, other things start to drive the organization. And it was unique to see how the variances occur. And really it was leadership. It was a functional difference that someone was the driving force behind why our margins were so high, or why we have a good parts turn, or why we have, you know, great service department, or why are we looking at this short line, you know, when no one else was, and now we've had it for 2 years and made money with it. You know, I mean, there's all those variables. So there was a degree of that. And a lot of times I saw fathers were becoming good coaches to sons. and father realized the market changed, but yet it was time for me to step aside, and that was so nice to work with a 50-year-old dad that decided I got to start stepping out of the way, because we can both tell those stories, Ron, of the other side of the coin of that 80-year-old that still won't get out of the way, and the input and the problems that creates, within the organization. So for me, that assessment process has opened a window of education that, I was going in to help, but yet I felt like I was getting an education.
Surely,
And
surely.
today, when I look back at, how am I coaching others today? Well, I'm still drawing on those experiences, and recognizing, well, they have some similarities of what they can do, but how are they going to get it done? What is the implementation plan? And that's where so I think that's, I think the whole concept of coaching, I think it's got some distorted views today, because coaching and training are really two different things.
Very much so. Very much so.
I often get asked, what training are you going to provide? Well, I mean, I can provide training, but it's really different. Training, I'm going to try to give you most of the answers, and give you a pathway. Coaching is, I might know the answer, but I want to make sure you know the answer, because sometimes that whole thought pattern of going through the exercises to think differently so that you can learn and apply. Oh man, Brown, and sometimes it's hard for me because I know the answer. I know what they need to say.
Oh, I know.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I just don't, I have different experience than the individual I'm working with. So I have to really be cautious because I want to move them faster than what they're maybe ready to go, because they're just not there yet. They're coming, but they're not there yet. And I'm sure you've seen that.
Well, yeah, but you bring up an interesting distinction between coaching and training, or coaching and teaching. And let's look at athletics. We have coaches, but we also have trainers.
Right.
And if we think in terms of professional athletes, you would think, well, gee, they don't really need to be taught or trained. Ain't true. They have trainers and they work with them every damn day in practice. And if you look at individual people, some of us have the luxury of being able to have a personal trainer to stay physically fit. And many of us are reasonably disciplined of going to doctors. And in both of those cases, they're going to do first an evaluation. They're going to do an assessment. They're going to do I used to call them operations reviews. In mine were spanned a month because they were typically larger dealers, but there's a different flavor for the different size of organization, the culture of the organization, the personality of the organization. And it's a joy. I used to love it to find a 50 to 55-year-old parent, and in one case it was a woman, who's coaching their successor.
Right.
Succession planning in business is a disaster typically. Large corporations, forget it, it's there, but the private guys, succession planning, they don't typically, don't need to worry about that. I'm immortal. I'm here forever. I'm bulletproof. So, and how to get people to stick their hand up and say, I need help in doing this. That's tough.
Well, it has been, and it is tough. As I think as we go through this, we're learning as we're running a business, we're running the dealership. I mean, every day we learn something new, and we don't realize sometimes what we don't know. We realize what we know, and we're trying to impart that every chance we get to our people, fix this, do that, all those type of things. And that challenge is what do I not know, and then how do I find that out?
Mm-hmm.
I call it speeding up the learning curves.
Mm-hmm.
So we see some dealers that, know they need to reach out and they'll attend a 20 group meeting, and those are, we produced those for years. Ron, I know you guys did too. I mean, it was a great exercise, but I always ended up having a lot of one-to-one conversations, off to the side after dinner. My wife started to travel with me the last several years, 10 years, and she would say, what time are you going to be done with the meetings? 10, 11, 12. Well, the meeting's over at 5. Yeah, babe, but that's now the real meeting starts, and I think that's where, sometimes classroom training, there's value in that. I mean, there's no doubt. There's the online training that you're doing, Ron, perfectly suited for today's market. But I also think there's times where it really is just a one-to-one. It's a one-to-one conversation that needs to occur because the individual might be a little embarrassed because, I run an $80 million organization, I'm supposed to, and it's okay that you don't know, even though I listened to Warren Buffett's interchange at his annual meeting. I mean, what a great example of humble leadership. Still after all these years, the man still articulates what he believes and he doesn't waffle, on that. So I think there's there's the ability, I think, for us as coaches and trainers and business people ourselves, Ron, where, you're doing pre-designed training. And I think that has tremendous amount of merit for individuals that are in need of certain competencies, certain skill set improvement. And there'll come a time in their, between pick an age, 30 and 50, in which classroom training is absolutely essential. And they've got to become an active learner, themselves. And that's sometimes hard to jumpstart people into, in our classes, we required them to read a book. And many, I haven't read a book since I got out of school. Well, I know, that's, you can't just attend this class and feel like you're getting everything you need. But it was also amazing on the homework assignment where they would write up something they learned out of the book. Some of them, they're only supposed to write a couple hundred words, Ron, and sometimes they wrote, 500, 600, 700. And, I still get people, Floyd, the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Such a simple thing, hit them. We started off with easy stuff. So I think the pre-designed course structures, I think, are absolutely essential as part of a continuous education flow. But I think there's a time there where one-to-one, becomes an extremely valuable. In college, I had Professor Parrott. They used to take me to the side, and I didn't know this at the time, Ron. He was just telling me to get off my butt. You're lazy, Jerkins. It's like, I'm here every day. I'm the first one to ask questions, but he pushed me further than what I was able to push myself. And it wasn't until some years later when I recognized that, I remember going back and saying, oh, thank you, Professor. He said, well, you cussed me for how many years? Now you're singing my praise. And that's part of a challenge that I think from us as, we try to coach, and sometimes people, do they really, I try to ascertain what is the personality I'm dealing with, because some people say they want to be pushed a little harder and challenge a little more, but when you do, they get all girly, if you will.
It's really interesting because you open up so many different facets of life just in the last 5 minutes, where our subject specific classes are about competence, and that's individual competence relating to the job function that the individual is performing.
Right.
And we still have today the understanding, the belief, the perception that when you finish school, your learning's over. And today, more than ever before, lifelong learning has to become part of our makeup. It isn't. Reading isn't. Continuous improvement became total quality management, and those things in the 80s, late 70s, Deming and Duran became really embedded in business. and talking about productivity gains, and this is really good. Well, it went away. Six Sigma came along, but it's gone away. 5 6, it's gone away. They've all gone away. And it's kind of endemic to the human condition that we're going to perfume the pig to get along. We're going to do what society says is topical now to get along. We don't really believe in it. And so, yes, we've got the classroom learning, and Warren Buffett, he's 91 years old, for goodness sake. He has wisdom coming out of every pore of his body. Charlie Munger, his right-hand man, he's equally astoundingly brilliant in a very humble way. There's a guy by the name of Eric Lauder who teaches at MIT, a class called The Secret of Life, that every student going to MIT has to take. It's a prerequisite, I think, to get their degree. And don't quote me, but I think that's what the circumstance is. He's brilliant. He mapped the DNA for the first time, but he also is a wonderful teacher. So my illustration there, or the reason I bring him up, is he's got 2 or 3 cameras in his classroom all the time. His classes are on the internet. They're free. It's the same class that the MIT student's taking it. They just don't get college credit for it. Same assignments, same people grading the scores, the whole damn thing. It's wonderful. So what we have is, he is a model of the new educator. So we might have the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Monkees, whomever all these fantastic musicians are, and I should make it more current, but we're going to have professors that way. That anybody who has access to a computer in the sub-Saharan Africa at their library, they can learn the same thing that they're learning in Boston or Oxford in England or wherever the hell it is. And then you go from there. There is a place for the face-to-face, the personal, the 20 groups you mentioned. What I found with them, and I dealt with 12, not 20, because I wanted to make it more personal. They had to give themselves, these are the leaders, creators in many cases of business, they had to give themselves permission to expose themselves, to be vulnerable, to say, I don't know. And do you remember the derision with which Donald Rumsfeld was met when he made the statement, we don't know what we don't know? It's actually a brilliant statement, but he was viewed as an idiot for making a very smart man that's being called an idiot. And we've got so many of them all over the place. But business, small and large, not huge, doesn't really want to get there. We hire a tool, a person, do the job. If the job changes and the skills don't match, we'll change the tool. We'll get rid of the person, bring somebody else in. That's not a sustainable practice going forward. No,
that's, we've talked before about these skill gaps that continually gets wider. And, that's coming at our market like a freight train. And it's already here, it's already in present, but yet it's not as adopted, as it should be. So I think that's where the ability to help the leadership gain a new perspective on not just the roles, responsibilities, but the new vision about where the market is going and how the market's getting there. Metz Kramer replied, to my article that you posted, on relationship selling on the metrics. And, for me, I've been preaching that, I don't know, around 15, 20 years, in the equipment space. It's just now becoming something that we're becoming aware of, but it's not brand new. But yet when we look at, well, again, the sales departments have traditionally, I went on this rant that one time with you, but I mean, sales departments traditionally have been the sacred cow, so we don't really address those. There's been so much emphasis in recent years on the service department, well, that's not brand new, I mean, it's been, talked about, and in the automotive side, it was the Jackie Cooper days, well, younger people there, who the hell,
Yeah.
Remember, the Ron Slee days, and now it's the Floyd Jerkins days. The consultants have came up and through, and here we are looking backwards, trying to look at try to help those that are still there in the trench move forward faster and better, by sharing that wisdom.
If we just focus for a second on Metz's comments relative to your metrics on relationship marketing, and he was talking about customer relationship management and Salesforce specifically, how leadership in businesses, leaders of the sales function, liked it because it monitored how much work the guy was doing. And Metz's perspective, saying, well, yeah, that's what these guys did it for. However, that tool is meant to help the salesman get more market,
Right.
more sales. And two sides of the same darn coin. If I have to play to an aspect of the leadership in order to get them to implement something, I'm not above doing that. Particularly when the leadership doesn't understand really what we're trying to do. And that's the case in many instances, isn't it?
Yeah. See, and that always bothered me when I worked with a dealer that, I said, we need to install a CRM system. But I said, first, let's get the management's head around it first. Before you even start a tool, let's understand what its purpose is. Why do you want it? What will you do with it? What will you do with the information that comes from it? What information do you want to, all the questions to try to wrap our heads around it. Because, to me, and I've seen this happen before, Ron, when we get, through coaching, you start to see a sales team and a sales manager understand the value of the metrics. When they get it and they understand how to tweak those metrics, then it's amazing how improving how the sales team presents the product, by practicing a walk around, and having the other salespeople critique it. When they get good at critiquing each other and learning from each other, man, that's a sign. That's a stimulus, and then all of a sudden you see the sales manager starting to recognize that in order to improve turns, I can improve my sales flows by improving how many people they talk to and figure out how best can we improve that ratio. If it's whatever number you start with, it's about how do you get a little bit better.
And if you stay there on turns just for a quick second, when I started, a turnover between 1.5 and 2.5 times on parts was deemed to be fantastic. Of course, in those days, our lead time, we had to mail our stock orders. It was months before everything got done. But what I was trying to get across was, how do I get people to get to 6, 8, 10, 12 time turn? Because everybody's of the perception that if I have that high a turnover, I'm going to run out of stock. It's not true, but it's a different deal. And I flipped it a little bit and said, okay, let's talk about the return on the capital you employ. And you have sales of $10 million, you make 30% on parts, you get $3 million profit. That means you're selling $7 million worth of inventory, some out of your stock, some you bring it in. So if I turn it twice, I have $3.5 million worth of inventory, and I get back a gross profit of $1 million. So that's a return on that investment, that capital, of something in the order of 28 to 30%. And that's, everybody says, well, gee, that's good. It's better than bond money. It's terrific.
Yeah.
I said, yeah. So let's say instead of a 2-time turn, we make it a 4-time turn. So instead of having $3.5 million of inventory, you got 1 3/4. So now instead of getting 28 to 30% return on that inventory, you're now getting $1 million on $1 3/4 million. You're getting about 58 to 60%. And what about if we go to 8?
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? You can drop your prices 50% and make more money. And they'd look at me. And all I'm trying to get them to do is think in a different way, change the lens through which they view the circumstance. That's what a coach does.
Right.
And we're not as good introspectively as we are if somebody is commenting. But now you got the ego coming into play.
Right. Right.
Who the hell are you to tell me what to do? What makes you think you're so much better than I am?
In the first part, of the coaching experience, I'm normally very, very patient. I have to ask a lot of questions and understand, because, you don't know where that ego trip is going to occur, and, it's easy for me to say, listen, you can fire me, that's fine, but you're still going to have the same problem, or you're not achieving the goal you want to achieve. So, if I'm rubbing you the wrong way, figure out why that is.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just don't like my tone, then we should have never engaged in the beginning.
Yeah.
But if it's something I'm saying, and generally that's where the one-to-one is so important, because it allows everybody to relax and truly try to figure out who you are and be yourself. And that's where the video is so helpful, because if it was just the phone, Ron, man, that's hard, to be able to read the rest of the body, and understand psychologically what's going on with that individual. If somebody squirms because they're uncomfortable, that's, is it because the chair is uncomfortable? You can't see that without having the audio, combined with the video. And in person, you're making all these sensory perceptions with smells and everything. So we narrow that down to this condensed version of audio and video. It can be extremely intense. I had a gentleman that smart man, good business, struggling with his succession. He's 64, 65 now, and trying to figure out what is he going to do with this big business with his 3 sons, 2 sons in the business, 1 not. Wife's perceptions, what she thinks, she's not in the business, but yet she has a voice, and he's really challenged. His banker's telling him one thing, his OEM is telling him a whole nother thing. And, so every time when we spoke, man, I could just, you just feel him over, watching him, he's just grinding through these emotions. And, most of that at that stage was listening.
Mm-hmm.
Letting him.
Yep.
And I said, why do you feel that way? What happened to make you feel that way? I mean, tell me the last time you felt that way. Tell me the first time you felt that way. And he says, you're making notes. I said, yes, sir, I am. I'm just tracking the detail here. And it was amazing how after, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 sessions, I said, okay, I want to make a presentation to you. And I said, I'm going to tell you some of the things I've heard. And he said, Floyd, that's not what I said. I said, well, sir, that's what you said. That's not what you intended to mean behind what you said. And so that's part of your friction that you're creating, with your family, is because what you think you're saying, you're not, and then when we went through that a few times, Ron, it was amazing how he said, Floyd, I've got to go. And I said, oh, don't leave me, in the middle of that conversation. But he had a recognition at that point. He became aware, of it, where he hadn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't aware. And when he was embarrassed, and he said, thank God it was just you, And I said, well, I guess that's a compliment.
It's really amazing. The one of the people that we have contributing, his name is David Jensen. And he's an HR specialist, but a really interesting background. He taught, he's got a master's in psychology, and he was one of the originators of personalysis, one of those personality profiling things. And it's a really good one. And there's Myers-Briggs, and there's a whole host of those things. But what you're pointing out, communications is not something that we're very honest about. We try and tailor the discussion to be suitable to the audience. And the selling personality, the selling conversation is different than the leading conversation.
Yes.
You talked about the term presenting. I like to use the term positioning. Presentations tend to be canned. Positioning is adapting it to that particular case. As a coach, I don't know that there's been very many superstar athletes. Like Wayne Gretzky is one of the best hockey players to ever have existed. He tried to coach. He was an abject failure.
Right.
The only star athlete that has worked out as a coach, and it's a very short record, so I hesitate, but Bill Russell, as the only time he didn't win an NBA championship was when he was the first year he was a player coach. Every year he was a player, they won the championship. The first year he was a full-time coach, they won the championship, but only when he did both. And what the superstar athlete cannot get is their drive, their absolute fanaticism of perfection
Right.
out of other players, because it isn't in them. In Canada, we used to have a commercial for canned meat. Say moo, oink, say moo, oink. Why can't you say moo? It just isn't in me. You know, leadership is not something that everybody is capable of doing. And the challenges of leaders in companies, whether you're sales or the owner or the product support, whatever it might be, the job tasks are so onerous, so demanding. They don't have time to get what I call up in the helicopter with me so that they can have oversight
Right.
of what's going on. And I always use 3 words in leadership. Everybody has to understand what we're trying to do. Everybody has to accept that what we're trying to do is the right thing to do. And if we get that, we get both of those, then they'll be committed. Where we miss out a lot of the time is we don't allow ourselves, or we don't engage in the fight about the acceptance. You can have a different perspective. I can have a different perspective. It's not personal. Throw them out on the table and let everybody look at those differences and fight about it. And boy, oh boy, does that ever create. And that's coaching in an active sense.
Yep. Yeah.
What you're talking about in getting a man to communicate with you and then playing back what he said, many leaders do not like confrontation.
Right. Well, that's, trying to identify the goals, the objectives, what do you want to accomplish? I mean, we start there, where again, in a pre-designed class, the objectives, the teaching objectives, and, we certainly have learning objectives that are different. Here it's really just about where are they, and I'm trying to figure out. And then once I think I've got it figured out, then we have to make sure we have it figured out, that we're all on the same page.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
communicate those goals, objectives very
Yep.
clearly. And then it's the journey of what have you done to try to get there? Why aren't you there already? And sometimes those questions, they bring up either bad experiences or poor judgment. And, that's part of it. I mean, that's where, trying to make someone feel comfortable, is really a key there, Ron, because your failures are your failures. You have to own them, but the challenge is we need to learn from them, and having it, presented back in a constructive fashion is so important to help frame that particular behavior or that particular decision-making style, or, really don't know. I mean, I try to figure out what is the knowledge that's either they have or they don't have. What are the skills they have or they don't have? What's the attitude? What is it, that we need to do to help them achieve those objectives? Yes.
You start out, what are our goals? I said, what's your purpose?
Right.
And boy, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
And
you got to be careful on some of that, because that's where the ego,
oh,
I've had a guy that had a, I don't know, 400 and something $1 million organization. And, all he was after was just tell me what to do. And it's like, well, no, we've got to go through this journey together. And it was hard to slow him down,
That's
because
the key, isn't it?
it was slowing him down because he was running 100 miles an hour run, and he could answer a question specifically just like that, but where he wanted to go versus where he was at versus his organization, there were like three different things going on there.
Well, and the other thing that it in many cases is missing is clarity
right
of that statement or that expression. So many people that I know lack clarity. They're clear in their mind, they know exactly what they said, but they always leave themselves side doors.
Yep. Yeah.
And that means the people that they're trying to lead, their followers, are really in difficulty trying to understand what the devil did that guy say.
Yep.
They go down a path, they think that's what he meant.
Yep.
They're successful down that path, and he jumps their bones.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, man. So all of a sudden they become hesitant about doing anything.
Over the years, especially when I was young, I developed a life formula. I was, and still am today, I'm pretty big on, I've got to have a roadmap.
Yeah.
Even in this journey of casual retirement, I still have to have a roadmap. That's just either part of my DNA, or like my wife says, you just got to know, don't you? Well, yeah, but I started this concept of dynamic living, and I knew early on that, I wanted to live a dynamic life. Well, I had to create a definition, of what that meant. And then to achieve that, there's certain life principles that had to come along. So I began, every time I recognized one, I would write it out and write 2 or 3 paragraphs that would describe that particular principle. And one of those is focus.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing how, when I can focus on something, I am pretty damn good at getting it done at a very high level. But when I'm scattered, I used to love to juggle 17, 18 things. But if it got to 22, I can't, that gets to the frustration side. And so many times when and I think especially now, Ron, in the equipment space, construction market is hot, agricultural market's hot, rural lifestyle. All these. So it's got these business, and then all of a sudden we threw pandemic in, and then we threw workforce shortages in, and then we threw, shortage of product in. We can't get the product. Oh my God. And now we've got customers that are smarter than my salespeople. Oh my God. Well, all these things coming at you, they lose focus, and that's what's it's easy to see it on the outside in, but it's hard to see it on the inside out. And yet that's where, a coach like myself, that's part of what we do, is we try to get them off the merry-go-round once in a while and stop for just a second. What's your purpose in that operation? What are you doing? I had one guy telling me, he said, well, I walk the floor every day. I don't get to my office till noon. I said, why do you walk the floor? Well, I'm pointing stuff out, all day long. Do you think that people would ever see those? Well, no, they haven't seen it by the time I got there. So from 7:30 to 8:30, you walk. So I said, maybe you just need to take your office and put it at home. Oh, hell, they'd never work without me. And we were several conversations before he finally said, you keep asking those questions, Floyd. What's the deal? Because again, I think he was intruding. A good leader sometimes anticipates and dreams and lays in bed and goes through all these different things. And they're usually further out ahead than what their organization is. But we have to be patient with our people to let them come along, to come on the organizational speed.
It's truly remarkable. We are involved in so many things. And I say this to people all the time. If you had a little bit more time to do anything that you did yesterday, Would you have done it better? And invariably, everybody says yes. I said, so let's look at this a different way. That means you're not allowing yourself to show the world how good you really are. Is that what your intent is? No, but I got so many things to do. So there was a movie out there with Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman called The Replacement. The Replacement, football players were on strike, so these guys replaced the real guys. And there was one scene in the room, and the coach is trying to get them to talk about, to think about, to explore what they're afraid of. And there was frivolous spiders and this, big, and Keanu Reeves' role, he's the quarterback, and he said, quicksand, coach. I'm afraid of quicksand. And they didn't understand it. Well, I'm stuck. I'm trying to get out. I can't. I'm stuck. I'm not in control. I'm stuck. And the owners don't give themselves, the leaders don't give themselves time. I always wanted to have 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. I closed the door, shut the door, turned off, you could, turn off the lights and think. I had a chair that was big enough. I didn't need to do anything of that. Just turned the chair and nobody saw I was there. And I got into that habit from the first dealer principal I worked with, Bob Hewitt. He was able to go to sleep for 15 minutes. And he had a little alarm clock on his watch that he'd set for 15 minutes. He'd go to sleep. He's back and he's refreshed. He did that 3 or 4 times a day.
Yep.
And I thought, wow. And then, different people you model yourself after. So coaching, there's one aspect of it. Mentoring is another. And I think they're twins under the same category. Yes. So to get the leaders to understand they need coaches, to understand they need mentors, when they're the best that there is in their place, and they know they're not the best, they're not as good as they need to be. The Army slogan, be all you can be. They know they've achieved a lot, but they haven't come anywhere near their potential. And where I really stump everybody is to say, okay, what the heck's your purpose in life? What you're saying, what's your goal? What's the strategy? And then we start talking about strategy and tactics. You ask 100 leaders, most of them won't know what the difference is.
Right. It's the ability to achieve the goal that they set forth is sometimes a little easier to do when they have that clarity, that focus.
Yep.
Because to me, I call it unfolding. Once I'm able to see it, then everything starts to unfold in front of me, and I can start, oh, there's possibilities. And then I have to challenge them again. Now we have to clarify and focus one more time, because there might be 5 different ways to do something where before you didn't see it. You didn't see anything. Now you see there's 5. Well, now we got to identify which of those 5 ways what's the objective? Is it to improve a department, improve a division, improve a branch? Is it the whole organization? Is it one set of people? Is it one group? What are your core, objectives here? And some of that's where before, Ron, I was doing a little bit of life planning, but more business planning stuff. And today I get a chance to kind of do both with some clients. They like to go through the life planning and the business stuff. And that's to me, that's holistic coaching. That's where I really enjoy it, because I always ask questions. What's your wife think about this? What's your husband think about this? What do your kids think about you going to be at home more? Do they want you at home more? No, they don't. Okay, well, all those variables, if you died today, what would happen? Some people said, man, Floyd, that's pretty forward. But we're going to start with the end in mind. And the end in mind is, we're at your funeral. Who's going to do the eulogy? Let's start there and back it up and say, how are we living life according to what we think we want to have happen, at our funeral. And then business is just a piece of it, but yet, and this is where sometimes, even back in my days, Ron, there was sometimes dealer owners would get, geez, Floyd, you're getting a little out there, aren't you? So, well, you've got life, you got business up here as the main purpose of your life, but yet you've got a family, you've got children, grandchildren, whatever that may be. You're sitting here telling me you don't have time to go be with them, but yet you run the company. Well, wait a minute, who gets to make that decision? Well, you're saying you're too busy because you don't have, well, how come? Why? Is it a time management issue? I mean, those words are thrown around so loosely, but it's as simple as, well, it's really complex, because trying to help them learn either to delegate, to be patient with the growth of people. I mean, or, if we're throwing off so much cash right now, man, I just it's working really well. And my challenge to that is, okay, you've been in business long enough to know when it wasn't. So in good times, you need to be as focused on day-to-day operations as what you were when you were not.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get the laziest, and that's when you start approving capital. We buy stuff, we buy more stuff than what we need because we've got the money. That's, every dealership needs to have a hell of a war chest.
But
if they listen to,
you bring up so many wonderful points, though. It's astounding. The last 2021, nobody that I've spoken with has ever made as much money in their history. And I said, terrific. What do you think the reason for that is? And they said, well, it's kind of, I don't know. The pandemic was still there. So we had to, we were working in different ways. Some people weren't in the office. I said, you know what it was? I said, no, you spent less money. And what are you doing now? Are you spending the same? I said, well, why don't we try and hold the same percentage expenses in 22 of sales as you had in 21? Well, I can't do it. We're traveling now. We've got expenses of, entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. I said, really?
Yeah.
It's really, I had a guy one time, as you were talking a short bit ago, I looked at this guy. He was the president of a company, large company, very experienced man, a high-ranking naval officer when he retired. So this guy was pretty good in so many ways. I looked at him on one particular thing he was doing, and I said to him, your wife would be embarrassed. And he stopped. And that's what I wanted to have happen. He said, what the heck do you mean? I said, think about what you just said. Your wife would be embarrassed with that.
Yeah.
And he started laughing. He said, I never would have thought that in a million years. And as a coach, you bring fresh eyes that they don't have in their brain. It's kind of like XML and HTML. Technology changes, so I have computerized now. As Matt Kramer or somebody calls them, business eyes, where I can track the cursor. And there's so many things where Jack Welch was famous for many things, infamous for being the guy that got rid of the bottom 10%.
Yeah.
That's being honest.
Yeah.
You're not being successful here. Isn't it time you get successful somewhere else?
Yeah. Ron, I had over the years, I always hired a consultant and always hired a mentor to help look at me. And I still remember a few of those stuck out really above some of the others. And one was a long-term consultant trainer of mine with me for 20 years, but I had such an admiration and respect for him that just his words could shake me. And that just doesn't happen. I don't get shaken very easily. And nor would he offer that very often, but when he did, when he gave me that wisdom, if you will, man, some of it was, and I look back at those were turning points for me that I felt I became a better man, because I wasn't seeing that. And most of those were constructive, positive movement things. Others were critiques of my own behaviors that, hell, I didn't see that, And I even had strong staff that would tell me those things. But even when they said it, it was like, okay, I didn't hear it from them.
What you're talking about is fine tuning.
Oh, absolutely.
You're maybe at 98, 99, 92% of your potential, but that last bit, that's hard. I mean, that's damn near impossible. It was funny. I was watching Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were on David Letterman years ago, talking about themselves and each other. And what drives you? And Larry would say, well, I do 1,000 shots every day. And then I'd be done, but I could see, I bet your Magic's doing 1,200. And I'd stay another hour. And Johnson said the same thing in return. He says, I'm out here 5 hours. I bet you Larry's doing 6. And there was another discussion the other day where they're talking about long basketball shots from distance. Stephen Curry, however you say his name, is one of the best. And an interviewer from ESPN is talking with Larry Bird, who's the best? And they go through a whole bunch of names, and finally the guy, Dan Patrick's the guy, and he says, well, were you in that list? He says, of course. I'm in any discussion of the best, They got that side of things too. You're part of the best, yet that is so unusual to be hiring a consultant to look at you. Every damn business leader should have that.
I was the only way I could get better is to see myself as others see me, and then make a decision. Is that something I need to adjust or not? Maybe that's just the way it's going to be. Maybe I am who I am, and all those things. But if what I'm doing is impeding on my ability to achieve the goals, objectives I set for my life or for my business, well, I can't be the albatross in that. I can't be the one that holds it back. My job is to release the organization and let it be the best it can be. And, that's, as an organization gets larger and larger and larger, we have more people that are struggling at these management and executive levels because they sometimes get thrust in these positions. And then we send them to classroom, and classroom doesn't satisfy those issues. It doesn't allow that individual to maybe vent or share their thoughts in a constructive way and get that type of constructed, either honest feedback or honest direction that comes from that. Just agreeing with someone is nice, but agreement creates complacency many times. And, like you, Ron, I love the debate. I love the honest debate and having a different way to think about a specific issue or topic. And when that occurs, I feel like I've expanded my mind again. I've expanded my heart. And that's what, I try to bring to the coaching, is to bring that sensibility to the table where, sometimes it's not as difficult as what people make it out to be to improve their situation or move forward. But sometimes they're the biggest albatross. They're in their own way. And if I can help them get out of their way, and really, everybody that achieves their goals, when they get there, they always look back and go, man, that wasn't as hard as, but then what's that next layer? Where are you going from there?
Yeah.
And that, that's tough. And I got so much respect for these guys and girls that are still in the midst of this, that, I just feel privileged of, I got to know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds like you, Ron. And, every time when I read something about the industry, I see names I know and people I know. And, it's hard for me, I know to further build a prospect bucket, I know how to sell. Wow, but, I'm not going to start 10 calls a day, and networking and all those connectivities, because I'm still turning stuff down because, if an individual isn't really ready to move forward, Ron, that used to be an enjoyable path to be on. And I'll debate with somebody why they need or why they could or how they could. But if at the end of the day, they're wanting someone to just agree with everything that they say, well, I'm probably not that guy. That's not what you hire me for. I'm not a devil's advocate all the time, but, at the same purpose, there's, I liked our conversation at the beginning before we started this, Ron, where this owner that, he's, 80 years old, but it's all of his employees. That's the people that are going to end up either having a struggle about what an owner's decisions are. And to me, as an owner of a business, it's our responsibility to protect our people, and the more that we do that through our own decisions by how we, most business today, you got to have some type of a health insurance plan. Come on. You got to have some type of a retirement plan. But those are the traditional pillars, of success in a company, but that's not it today. I can name you businesses that were succeeding and failed miserably in a short time period because of sexual harassment. Because, look at the woke society today. Some of the things that how they would treat women in the past. My God, I grew up with 8 sisters, so either you respect the girl or you're going to get beat up by all of them, but I think there's these underpinnings of success today are shifting. And I think it's that, I see that pretty clearly today. And, we used to say always, Ron, for years, the personal development is the key to organizational development. The way the organization gets better is when your people get better. Well, that's not just lip service. That has to be, I think some years you could fake that and be okay. Man, in today's market, I don't think so. You've got employees that are leaving because they just don't want to work for someone they don't like anymore, or work in an organization they don't like, or they think they can do better. You got people, we can talk about those issues, society's issues and the social norms are changing very rapidly. And that changes the way we have to conduct ourselves in business to be able to drive all the systems, all the processes that we need to do, because the competencies for certain roles have changed, and that's where you're right on the mark of that stuff. Where, it used to be, a service manager, if he had his toolbox in the shop, that was a good service manager. Well, that's the far cry. I know some service managers today that really don't have a mechanical background.
Yep.
They've got more of a leadership and a management background. It's nice to see women in ownership roles where, for a while that was, you just didn't see that. This was a male captive audience, in this market. And now we see that, and it's not that. I had a guy tell me, they're proving themselves, Floyd. And I listened to that a few minutes, and I finally said, hang on. I said, so women are just now proving themselves. That's why they get to become a dealer principal. I didn't say it that way. And I said, no, you didn't. But
yeah, right.
I'm just saying, if it's a person you're referring to, okay. But when you're saying the women, I said, I don't know if that's quite correct today. So I think there's numerous opportunities, but the markets are shifting. I think our consumers are shifting. Certainly our economy is shifting. So
we're opening up so many corners of discussions for the future that, the primary characteristic of a coach, to me, has to be trust. Whoever you're coaching has to trust you completely. That trust has to be earned through experiences, through actions. And I'm hoping that these discussions with you to the audience allow them to look at you differently and allow them to think about coaching differently than what has been the case. They cannot be experts in all aspects of the business. If they are, they wouldn't be doing it. They'd be doing something else. So I think I want to wrap this now. I think we've given a pretty clear picture of what we mean by coaching. And then I'd like to use these coaches' corners or whatever we're going to call this to expand on that in different directions. And I just wanted to the audience say, you know, if this has resonated, we're going to have contact information out there. We do on our website on Learning Without Scars for Floyd. If you want to talk to Floyd about this, send him an email or a voicemail or a text and start engaging in that. Floyd isn't going to be working full time, so don't flood him. But the man has an inordinately deep well of wisdom and knowledge and experiences that all of us would be foolish to overlook them or ignore them. So with that, Floyd, as my closing shot, how would you want to wrap this up?
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Ron. I think I'm just a guy that's on a journey in life, and my giving back and, is not stopped. That's still a big piece of what makes me happy, is helping other people and seeing them improve their lives and improve their businesses. And, that still is just, I still just get excited about that. There's nothing better than seeing people take the ideas and run, and just still pretty neat, So I thought that would change as I got older. Maybe I'd lessen that a little bit, but it hasn't, it's still there.
I think that passion gets even hotter as time goes by.
Yes.
So thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time, and thank you to the audience for listening. And tune in to more discussions with Coach Jerkins. Mahalo.